Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Inexpressive Kashiwada and Expressive Oota, Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Like always, I'll include time codes so you can kind of jump around to the different segments of the episode to hear my thoughts about them. First segment involves Tadokoro being stuck in the middle. At first you thought it was bad enough he's stuck between Oota and Kashiwada, but then it turns out it's even worse because he's right next to Tabuchi, which I'm like, did any of them really move too much? Because they were relatively close to each other, weren't they, if I remember correctly? But I think they were more like, I think each one of them was diagonal from each other. So it's funny, there is kind of like this. Well, he's stuck in like a triangle formation, but there was already a triangle formation between that trio already. But like I think they were both on like rows diagonal to Kashiwada and behind her, if I remember correctly. I could be mistaken, but now they're like they're even closer to her. And I love that Tadokoro knows like what this is. He's like, I'm in the middle of some BS, and he looks over to the other side of the classroom, and Sada's over there like, hey, keep it up, and everything. It's like, here you are, the person who enjoys this mess the most, who lives for it, who thrives on this, is on the other side of the classroom and doesn't have to get stuck in the middle of this. To the point, Tadokoro was like, hey, Kashiwada, since you like messing with, Oota, since you like messing with Kashiwada so much, do you want to, switch season? He's like, what? You think I want to get closer to her? He's like, that's not what I meant. Hey, Kashiwada, do you want to switch seats or whatever? And she just looks at him and is like, I'm fine. And he's like, then why do you keep turning around looking? Just keep looking forward. So, understandably on Oda's perspective, because it's just like his obsession with Kashiwada and wanting to get to her, so he's probably sitting there plotting. That's probably why he's staring at her so hard. It's like, oh, my target's so close. Gotta come up with some idea to get some, like, expression out of her. But I can only assume the reason why Kashiwada doesn't want to move, it didn't say anything, but I was wondering, like, is she too embarrassed to be right in front and that close to Oota that she likes having a buffer? Or is it a thing of, I enjoy there being a buffer because it makes it that much funner? Like, our game, like our little back and forth is so much more fun because there's someone in between. There's not the direct access. I don't know. I'm curious what her thought process is on why but it also could just be like, hey, we were all put in these seats for a reason. I'm comfortable with this seat. It'd be actually kind of interesting if it turns out Kashiwada actually didn't move. Maybe this was her original seat and pretty much everyone else got moved around. And so maybe that's also a reason why, like, I actually really like this seat, so I don't want to move. Either way, there's going to be a game in the class where it's like, hey, we're going to pass letters back and forth, drawings back and forth, and whoever lasts first loses type of thing. And Tadokoro not only has to avoid getting caught by Oniwagawara, but also Tabuchi as well. So it's like, okay, cool. The first one was a giraffe, but it was a horrendous drawing because he used too much of the paper. And I love that Tadokoro is like critiquing it like, yo, like you didn't leave yourself enough space. Now the legs are super short. He passes it to Kashiwada. She does her drawing. Well, first she does laugh, but then she passes it back and it turns out it's it's a smaller giraffe next to him. And he's like, what is this, a family? And Oniwagawara is like, what's a family? He's like, nothing, sir, never mind. And he passes it to, he's laughing at it, but then he also passes it to Oota, who's also laughing about it too. And I'm like, that's actually kind of fun. And then like, Oota passes his forward, and it turns out it's Tabuchi. And it's like, oh, Tadokoro is laughing at it, and then Tabuchi's like, oh, so that's what you think of me. It's like, oh, come on, that wasn't even me, that was Oota. But I love that at the time you're like, man, Tadokoro, in classic fashion, you're not even the one doing anything. You're stuck in the middle of all this BS, and you're the one getting called out by the teacher time and time again. And then finally we have Kashiwada going on the offensive and drawing something first, and she drew Oniwagawara like that, which I'm like, that's so interesting that like you'd expect that from Oota, especially considering the Tabuchi drawing. I would have never expected Kashiwada to be the one that drew that, and it's just like, holy crap. And then of course Oniwara would see that, and not only Tadokoro, but even Oota, which is so interesting he got dragged into it, because I guarantee you Oniwara probably thinks Oda's the one that drew it, even though it was Kashiwada. The least suspect amongst that is the one who drew that thing. And I love that she was just so focused on, like, it says, like, oh, trying to figure out the next thing to draw. So they got in trouble for that. And then Oniwara's whole takeaway is kind of like, would it be better if I wore an outfit like this, if I reflected this drawing? Because, like, he's so focused on, like, you know, trying to get rid of his bad reputation, and every attempt has either fallen flat or blown up in his face, like the whole, you know, secretly being inside the box and wanting to surprise the kid, but the whole, you know, fish can debacle was that last episode, kind of screwed the pooch on that. So still looking for that opportunity to create some levity in class and kind of change his reputation. And it's like, I actually am curious to see if he actually pulls the ripcord on this and actually tries that. Hopefully he doesn't. But yeah, I'm curious to see if this sitting arrangement continues for the rest of the series, or was this just like this part of the episode and after this it's not an issue anymore. Who knows? And now moving on to the second part of the episode, which is kind of interesting because it seems like some of this stuff might be out of order, because it feels like this part of the episode probably should have came before the Tadokoro, because I know some stuff is being adapted a little out of order. It's not all sequential from the manga, just based on like manga titles. There is a little bit of like bouncing around to some extent, but either way, because there's a conversation of like, right, it's the snow's piled up and it seems like winter break is over, because they're finally going back to school, and it's like, oh, all they did was spend their entire winter break just inside playing games. And with all the snow piled up, they run across Kashiwada, who's making a snowman, and immediately, like, Sada and Tadokoro are like, well, he's going to do the thing of, he's going to run over and kick her snowman, which he's like, y'all wouldn't do something that lame. What I am going to do is I'm going to take this icicle and I'm going to put it in, like, against her neck, and she'll be so cold and freaked out. It's like, well, that's lame as well too, my dude. But I also love that, like, Sada and Tadokoro continue to assume the worst about Oota. Understandably, considering, like, he kind of is such a menace. But obviously he's immediately taken down by Kashiwada, who threw a snowball at him. It's like, oh, I saw you looking like you were about to sneak and do something. She's like, yeah, you're probably going to sneak over there and stab me with that. He's like, what kind of imagination do you have? It seems like you're thinking even worse than me, that you'd assume I'd stab you with it. And so he tried to hit her with snowballs, but every time he does, she dodges, because she's like, oh, I could just read your expression and know exactly where they're going. So Oota, wanting to get her, is like, all right, you know what I'm going to do? The first one that gets covered in snow, you're done. And he's like, oh, I'm going to keep throwing snowballs. She's going to, like, go back to that pile of snow behind her, and she's cooked. And then she picks up a giant piece of ice, which I love that he's now on the other side, like, oh my god, is she going to throw that at me? She wouldn't do that, because that would actually kill me. That seems like a pretty thick chunk of ice. Is she just intimidating me because she knows exactly what I'm going to do? I was like, well, she's probably going to throw it and something's going to get knocked down and cover you in snow. And that's exactly what happens. So he immediately loses. And he's like, yo, this time I'm going to throw snowballs and you're going to back up into that pile of snow. It's like, oh, cool. So now you're just admitting what your strategy was. And he continues to lose. Eventually, Sada and Tadokoro decide to join Kashiwada's side. And it's just like, yeah, you kind of 3-on-1. You are already losing, and now you're losing even worse because you can't hit them, but they can hit you repeatedly. It's like, man, you are garbage at this. But I think his only takeaway from it all, despite like him always, you know, his war against Kashiwada, just the fact is that they are having fun, and he sees her just like piling up the snow, and he kind of smiles because he just sees like, right, she's having fun. And I think it's like, I think there's also an element of like, now you also kind of start reading too deeply into it. You're like, oh, was that the plan the entire time? Because you saw her by herself. There was no one she was playing with. She was making the snow by herself. And now it's turned into a snowball fight where you're all involved. So you're all having fun together. So maybe there's a little bit of that where it's like, hey, nice to see you're smiling and you seem to be happy, you know? And it's like, on some level, it's like, you like her being happy. You'd never admit it. because they called him out for like, hey, we got you with a snowball because you were stuck grinning. He's like, I wasn't grinning. It's like, yeah, you were. And I think knowing that he was happy, that she's happy, kind of made her even more happy. So very sweet in that regard. But it's like, like I said, it makes you read into it too much of like, is it just his overcompensation of like, that's what his true motivation was, to pop all this all so they could play? I mean, yeah, it's probably a thing of initially it starts with he has his ulterior motive, his menace, ulterior motives, but maybe it's not as much that he secretly has this good altruistic reason for doing it. It's just that it's a byproduct of his mischief, and it just happens to be a happy accident or just happy byproduct at the end of the day. And now moving on to the third and final part of the main episode, we get a flashback, which I immediately thought was interesting because we find out that Kashiwada and Oota have known each other back when they were in preschool. I was like, interesting, because there was a post-credit scene at the end of one episode that showed Kashiwada, basically because of her expressionlessness, that it made her harder to connect with people, and kids kind of avoided being around with her or hanging out with her because they can never tell are you really enjoying this and not, and that kind of led to her being alone. And we see that pretty much happen up until now present day with Oota. And so I was thinking, well, if you've known each other, would that be an issue? But the episode does answer that by the end of it. But yeah, obviously Oota has always been the troublemaker, wanting to get a rise and a reaction out of people. He's always been the little menace, and the teacher kind of gets on his case about it. But he's running off playing, and he sees Kashiwada playing on her own. And then the teacher, eventually while they were all playing, was like, hey, you guys should play with Kashiwada. But they're like, well, we can't tell. She doesn't seem like she's enjoying it. So we just assume she prefers playing by herself, which is so sad that she kind of got ostracized, obviously, at such a young age. But Oota took this as an opportunity because he wanted to freak her out. He threw the frog at her, but got no reaction out of her. So she ended up throwing the frog back at him, and he freaks out. And it's funny, and interestingly enough, it's actually Oota that suggests to her, well, if you can't show people what you feel, at least tell them, tell people what you think and what you want to do. Because he saw her looking outside. He's like, oh, you do want to play tag with us, and then tell people what you want, And I think for her that meant the world. It's he was the first person to ever really reach out to her. And it's I think because of that, she might not always be able to showcase what she's feeling, but she does speak her mind a little more, and with the exception of times she gets super embarrassed when it comes to him. But she is a little more vocal about what she wants and her perspective on things when she wants to voice her opinion. And I think he kind of gave her the courage to do that. So he's the one that brought her out in front of everyone. And it's oh yeah, I had to go get something, and it's Kashiwada, and she's like, I want to play that. Oh, you want to join it? And so they all play, and they're hanging out together. It's a lot of fun, and it's really adorable. And I think it's interesting because later on, Kashiwada sees Oota looking around in a room, and at first she's about to say something, but he's like, oh, because he's looking for the frog. And now I wondered, I was like, oh, did she not want to, my initial thought was, oh, did she think he was looking for her and she was kind of upset by that? Or two, he was looking for the frog and she's like, oh, I don't want to bother you while you're looking for the frog. I'll worry about it. And while she's laying in bed that night, she's like, I'll thank him tomorrow. But the time she goes into school the next day, turns out him and his family are moving. And you're like, that's why. So she's always kind of Oota, but obviously that's grown even more now upon being reunited with him. Because for her, it's probably the beautiful thing of Oota treats her the same way. He was the first person to reach out to her, and he continues to be that person who reaches out to her. Yeah, he's poking for, but it's knowing he hasn't changed much. He's still the same person she knew back then, and she never got an opportunity to thank him. And it's she's that aspect of especially coming from Oota, who is so expressive, so it's easy to tell what he thinks. For him to, he makes his declarations, stuff like that, even though he keeps stuff bottled up and tries to keep stuff hidden away, despite being the open book that he is, that he gave her that advice, ironically enough, and she's held on to it, and that's what she likes about him. And so, and she's even thinking to herself, he probably doesn't remember me. And this kind of goes into the point I brought up during the snowball fight thing, where I was, had that, conversation back and forth about how much does Oota do what he does just because well, for one, yes, he is the mischief maker that he is, but maybe he does it specifically with Kashiwada because he sees how alone she is because no one else like really interacts with her, so that's his way to overcompensate for that. Or and like but I also said like it could also just be a happy accident, which he appreciates that he sees like, that's where it's like kind of last episode with him smiling at seeing her happy, having fun, makes you go, it seems like he does do that on purpose and he's just hiding his true intentions. But now in retrospect, it makes me wonder, maybe he does remember and he just doesn't let Kashiwada's under the impression he doesn't remember, but he does, but he assumes Kashiwada doesn't remember him, so he hasn't brought it up. So I think it's probably a thing of both of them remember. But it's like that's why she has such an affinity for Oota. After all this time, they're reunited and he's still being that helpful person, being around her, being a source of entertainment, and being her friend, and obviously being more because she likes him. And that's what she likes about him, is just like him just being who he is, and also just like how easy it is to kind of read him no matter how much and obviously she says, and that's what I like about you, and then immediately kind of Naruto runs out the classroom. She can be very surprising and trolly in her own way. We've seen that time and time again, but especially moments like that. So I just thought that was, obviously it's sweet but with like an undertone of sadness. But it's kind of, the end result is they got reunited and here we are now. So the question then becomes, when will that conversation come up to be like, hey, do you remember me? I remember you. And once again, is that why? Because I'm trying to remember. Because we saw the day they first met right outside of school. I think we saw that in the previous episode. I don't think it might have been the first episode, or at least might have been part of the first episode when we saw them like properly meeting. But it's like it might have been just a thing of they meeting again for the first time after all these years, and neither one of them could bring themselves to bring that up because they once again assumed the other one forgot, because it was a monumental thing for one, and the other probably thinks, well, it probably didn't mean as much to you when it did. It was fundamental to both of you in a lot of ways. So I'm curious to see the exploration of that going forward. See if they end up kind of diving into that more as the series progresses. And then finally we have the cute little post-credit scene where Oda's like, hey, can you wink? And Kashiwada and she's like struggling, but her eyes aren't even closing, and both her eyes are wide open, and Oda's laughing, ha ha ha, look at you, you can't do it, looks like it's my win. He's like, see, and he closes both of his eyes and he's like, you can't do it either, you idiot. I love that. I was like, oh, that's such a cute little stinger at the end of the episode. I thought that was neat. It's just like, yeah, you just take your hot shit and it turns out, nah, man, you suck too. It's just funny that like, and just them being the polar opposites, where hers is, oh, my eyes are wide open and I can't close them at all to try and wink, but his method of winking is to just close both of his eyes and thinking that counts. I can wink with both my eyes. I think it's a little easier, I think, with my right eye than it is my left eye. I feel like I kind of put more effort to kind of wink with my left eye, but it's kind of easier with my right. Either way, that's kind of beside the point. But yeah, just kind of another continuous, adorable, cute episode. I'm excited to see where the next episode ultimately ends up taking us going forward with the next episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.